So thank you very much to the partnership for the opportunity to be here along with this esteemed cohort of colleagues and subject matter experts. I want to reiterate what many of the previous speakers have said today, but from a slightly different perspective. So as Tom mentioned, I began my career as a special agent with the DEA, principally working undercover in international narcotics investigations. I volunteered to go to Guadalajara, Mexico when Agent Camarena was kidnapped and murdered. And during that time, we initiated an investigation called Operation Halcón. One of our very first interdiction efforts involved the seizure of 1.3 tons of cocaine in the Sonoran Desert. That's me in the white shirt facing the camera with my partner at the time. And I share that because the comments that I want to offer today are from personal experience. And in fact, the emphasis is on personal. Tom alluded to this earlier, but everybody in this room will be a patient and a caregiver in your lifetime. And many of you I see from the nodding heads probably are today. My mother was a breast cancer survivor. Like so many people, after tragedy, she was diagnosed with breast cancer a year after my father died. She's a survivor. She got good medicine, good medical care. She lived long enough to see my 2 children born. This is a picture of her with my daughter, who's now 24 years old, when she was 14 months old. A spitting, painfully similar image to my mother. But she lived. She was ultimately diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. No cure. She died. The message to us was, if there's medicine available, you have a chance to live. And if you get authentic, safe medicine, you should live. And that shouldn't be a doubt today. Next slide. And yet today, the World Customs Organization will tell us that the counterfeit drug problem is a $200 billion underground economy. To put that in perspective, next slide, please. Heroin and cocaine combined is $160 billion. Now, Director Free and others have commented that due to the lack of consequences, sentencing guidelines, complex myriad of regulations globally, counterfeit medicines is a very high reward, low risk enterprise. So traditional illicit drug traffickers have now included counterfeit medicines as part of their portfolio. And why not? You can make more money, you likely won't go to jail, and you already have the mechanism. For the Spanish speakers in the room, the fayuca, right? Washers and dryers, alcohol, money, guns, they move through the same channels, and in fact, tunnels. Next slide, please. Sam and others talked about Avastin. So this was a counterfeit medicine that oncologists, our trusted doctors in America, were buying online and administering to cancer patients. Somebody else mentioned, really, these are organized crime, traditional illicit drug traffickers preying on the most vulnerable of our society, the sick and dying. A friend of mine from the University of California, San Diego, who's a PhD, MD, JD, more degrees than a thermometer, I'm sure we could all agree, says that this was the perfect crime. He bought the medicine unilaterally without anybody knowing, from a foreign source. Wholesalers didn't know, distributors didn't know. He infused it into a cancer patient who never saw the vial, who didn't buy it at a pharmacy. And when the cancer patient dies, there's no autopsy because they had cancer. So we're regularly asked, how many bodies are there? Where are the bodies? Who's dying? I think it's a fair question. The problem is we don't know the answer because we don't have the facts. Next slide. Last week, it was announced that children in Mexico and state hospitals in Veracruz had died because they received counterfeit Avastin. Not only do these innocent children die in hospitals, in Veracruz State where they were being treated. But they say the number of children who died outside the hospital is unknown, but greater than those who died inside the hospital for the same reason. So if I could just reflect back on the first slide, last week's news out of Maricopa County, Arizona, Phoenix, the special agent in charge of the DEA announced that they have determined that drug cartels in Mexico are manufacturing counterfeit prescription opioids with fentanyl and sell those in the United States. And the fentanyl is coming from China, Thailand, Mexico. So now we're conflating the prescription drug counterfeiting problem with the horrible opioid crisis in America. And now we're talking about illicit drug trafficking organizations at the highest magnitude involved in counterfeit medicines. So in this incredibly divisive climate that we live in today in America, right? It's just not something that we should be dealing with every day. But I hope the one thing we can agree upon is that we can't allow organized crime and drug traffickers to dictate healthcare policy in America. So those are my comments. I share them with you very personally. It's critical that we have an objective conversation about this. And I'm incredibly privileged to be here to speak with you with our other esteemed colleagues. Thank you.